It's been 6 months since COVID-19 disrupted the world. How are you adapting to the consequences this virus brings? Are your work projects, your business, do they have to change overnight? Are we going back to normal? How are we going to navigate life and work with this virus around? Today's webinar, Finding the New Normal, not just any new normal, a better new normal, as our speaker would like to put it, is brought to you by the Project Management Association Singapore, PMAS, the PMAS Young Crew, which are members of the International Project Management Association, IPMA, together with ThinkingitBetter. Joining me on the panel today is my co-host and moderator, the PMAS Young Crew chairperson, Ting Wei. Ting Wei, hi.
Hello, good evening everyone.
So, tell us a little bit about our speaker today. I know that the two of you have a certain connection going back.
Yes, we do. We have two things that bring us together. I know Ian personally. Firstly, it's at a professional capacity, Rolls-Royce, having worked in Rolls-Royce together, and as well as project management that brought us together. And it's my pleasure to invite Mr. Ian Travers as the speaker today. Ian, please tell us more about yourself and how Thinking It Better came about and the philosophies behind the founding this company.
Okay, well, thanks for that welcome, and good evening, everybody, and good afternoon to those who are, I see, joining from the UK as well, which is great. It's a really interesting history, really. So I went to university as an engineer. I became a mechanical engineer when I left. I'll be honest, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but my dad had been an engineer, so I thought, oh, I'll do engineering. But then very, very rapidly, when I started my first part of my career, which was in aerospace at Rolls-Royce, based in Derby in the UK, I soon became to realise that I wasn't really into this engineering stuff. I was far more interested in getting lots of other stuff done and getting involved in all kinds of projects and improvements and all kinds of things. And then, like most young career-hungry graduates, I thought, this is not moving fast enough. They haven't realised what I can offer the world yet. So I left to try and find my fortune elsewhere. And that was probably the best thing I did. I spent a number of years doing different things. I went as a manufacturing engineer to a company making machinery for the shoe manufacturing industry in Asia. I spent some time working in off-road farm machinery, a little bit of time in automotive. Eventually went back to Rolls-Royce, so once wasn't enough. So I went back again, but I had learned so much more outside. I'd become more worldly, I think you'd probably say. I'd had to run teams and manage projects. At this point, by the way, I didn't know anything about project management. I just got stuff done. Somewhere along the way, I became a part-time police officer in the UK. So 10 years as a special police constable, as they call it in the UK. And I got involved in self-defense training and was one of the first specials in the UK to actually have the qualification of a self-defense instructor. And you're thinking, what on earth has that got to do with what I'm doing now? But you'd be amazed. You meet so many different people in that walk of life. And when you're dealing with conflict, it's not about weapons, it's about using your voice and your ears. So when I went back to Rolls-Royce and I aspired to and gained senior staff status at Rolls-Royce and had some fantastic roles. My last one there was a global role looking after project and program management. My theme all the way, when I reflect, it was all about getting the best out of people. If I look at everything I've done, and literally everywhere in my work career and what I do outside of work, it's about bringing groups of people together and helping them have some fun doing it, and by that way motivating and getting the best out of people. So when I knew I wanted to do my own thing, I suppose I made the decision to leave because I'd achieved everything I kind of had wanted to achieve at that point. But I thought, there's a gap. No one is talking to people about behavior. You could go on specifically behavioral courses and you could go on management courses and that kind of thing, but they were very compartmentalized. And I thought, do you know, there's a gap here. What about someone who understands a bit about how the mind works and has a real interest for that, but also bears the scars of industry, you know, and has been the one, you know, trying to placate customers and get shop floor problems resolved. And so I decided to launch Thinking It Better. It was invented, conceived in a motorway service station just off the M1 south of Derby one lunchtime when I was actually doing my first bit of independent consulting back in 2012. And we come up with the name, Thinking It Better, which has stuck with me. And that's it. I then became a one-man band. It was me against the world, and I was grateful for a good relationship in the early days with Rolls-Royce. We did some work, quite a lot of work with Rolls-Royce. But then from one-man band, I now have, if I just look on the chart on the wall behind me, we now have passed the 20 figure. We've got over 20 in our team, and we're operating, we have legal entities in the UK, Thinking It Better Limited, and in the USA, Thinking It Better LLC. And we've got Mr. Isaac Ong based in Singapore, who is now our representation of our business as we grow and develop in that region as well. And I couldn't be happier. It's all about making the world a better place, one thought at a time. So that's kind of how I got here. Is that okay?
So good to have you here, Ian.
Thank you very much.
To people who have joined us and didn't know, we were scheduled to have Ian back in February in Singapore, and then COVID happened. Yeah.
Who saw that coming, eh? I know. We were just saying earlier on, weren't we, that we were, myself and a colleague, Mel Greaves, we were due to fly out to Singapore and spend a couple of weeks in region doing some stuff with PMAS and the Singapore Air Show, and then the world changed again. The world seems to have moments, doesn't it, where it has big changes and big disruptions going on. So thanks for inviting me today to talk about the new normal. It's a word that's been bandied around a lot. And before we get into talking about it, and I would love to hear any questions as we go through, as has been explained through the chat, and we'll try and be as interactive as we can. But I just wanted to take a minute to talk about what to expect over the next 40 minutes or so. Storytelling. If you think for a minute about what you remember from childhood, you remember things where there was a story. You remember nursery rhymes, or you remember things that made you laugh on the TV, cartoons, or books that were read to you. And they are very, very deep and often happy memories, really, really memorable. And I find that's the best way of getting us to exercise our minds and think about things from a different point of view is by storytelling. So what I'd like to do for the next 45 minutes or so is to tell you some stories, but stories that have some logic and science around them, stories which I hope you will be able to relate to personally, and ultimately to find something in there of use to you in searching for this new normal. What on earth does that mean? So that's the journey that we're on. So I'd like to split what we're going to say into two parts. And first of all, to put some context around this is, so before we delve into the new normal, what do we mean by normal? What is it? And how do we know what normal is? So I wanted just to show you a few slides and pictures just to try and explain what we mean by that. So what I shall do now, and we have rehearsed this, so seamlessly a slideshow should appear on the screen. So just bear with me. Right, okay, I'm just going to look to my fellow panelists there for a thumbs up that they can see. This is titled Finding the New Normal. And I could do with a pen to kind of scribble out and put an extra word in there now, because I think this is about finding the new, better normal. Those of you who may follow me on LinkedIn know that a few weeks ago I posted a short video that said, I don't want to go back to normal. I want it to be better than that. I want to look at this as an opportunity. You know, we've shuffled the deck of cards. What's next? So as we go through here, we'll talk about normality, but I want to help you create in your mind what you think normal means to you. And so what does better normal mean? So let's first of all talk about normality. So I want to show you a few pictures. If you're sat close to your screen, I may have to apologise for the next picture. So here we go. The next picture. Whoop, there you go. So I can see some of you already scurrying for the door to the room. So we're looking at a picture of a spider. What on earth has this got to do with new normality? Well, you've all reacted to that picture. Some of you, I mean, I can actually even feel a slight shudder running down my spine, because although I don't mind spiders, at the minute I'm looking at one that's about a foot across, about a foot from me. And even that, for someone who's actually okay with spiders, is generating all kind of reactions in me. So the reason for showing this picture is part of normality is how you read and how you react to what's happening around you. So some of you, and I apologise, I will move off this picture, probably are not enjoying looking at this spider. That is because of how you have learnt to react to that over your life so far. Okay, let's try something else. Okay, so when you look at this, different reactions again. Some of you will be thinking, like my wife Jane, when she looks at pictures like this, she would jump literally at the opportunity to fall out of an aeroplane. But then some of you will be saying, why on earth would you do that? You've got the comfort of a lovely, warm, safe mode of transport, and you're going to throw yourself out of it with a rucksack on your back and hope that it's been packed okay, and of course it's going to be fine. But what we're driving at here is we have these conditioned responses to what's happening around us, and this is part of our normality. This is part of things that we react to. There are things that make us feel calm and happy, and there are those that make us feel excited, and those things that make us feel fearful. And that understanding how we process that is part of understanding what we mean by normality. So let's just try another picture. Okay, so here we have a very nice airplane. If you're into aerospace, then you'll recognize the plane. This is one of the latest planes going into service now. But why show this plane? The statistics show that many hundreds of thousands of people are fearful of flying. But here's the interesting thing. Most people who are afraid of flying have never flown. Yet they're afraid of flying. What's all that about? Well, it's about the spider, isn't it? It's about, you'll probably in your younger years taught, oh, be careful of spiders. Be careful of spiders, because spiders can do bad things. So when you see a spider, you know, run. And we live in an age of data now and information. It used to be that knowledge is power. Now we have so much knowledge coming towards us, you actually don't know what's true and what's not true. So with all this stuff coming towards us all the time, many people who have a fear of flying, who have never even been near an aeroplane, how have they built that fear? Well, they built it because they've heard stories. They've heard stories of awful things happening. And of course, whenever it's reported on the news, You know, it's the main thing. They want to grab your attention. And what all of these things do, the things we've learned as we've grown up, the stories we've heard as we've grown up, and the stories that we are receiving every day through social media, through the news channels, they are forming our normality, and they are grabbing our attention. So what we need to understand is what's happening there. What is the process? Because if we can understand how we are forming those reactions and forming those views, then we've got a good handle on how to change it for the better and how to establish a new normality. So what we're looking at, this is a very, very widely understood model of human behavior. And I'm just going to use a simple tree just to illustrate it. So what we know by what we've just experienced in the last 3 pictures is the way we think about things determines the action we take. It becomes habitual. So if you are a person who is afraid of spiders and I show you a picture of a spider, you are immediately going to take action and feel stuff based on your thinking. Is that making some sense? What we think about drives our actions. And that can work against us, but it can also work for us. So I coach some runners. So we have a beginners running group, beginners and intermediate running group. And when people first join the running group, it's quite interesting. I live in the hilly part of the country in the UK, Derbyshire. We actually live on the top of a hill. So what that means is whenever you go for a run, when you come back, guess what? You've got to run uphill. And often the conversation with my new attendees in running is, hey, Ian, I've got to tell you, I don't do hills. I'm awful at hills. So, well, what's that? You know, we know how this works now, don't we? We know that there's some conditioning, there's some learned habits in there. So we're running along and they can see a hill and you can hear them. They say, oh no, look, there's a hill. But of course they already know that hills are bad. So already all of that behavior and reaction, not quite as extreme as the spider maybe, but you know, the legs are starting to hurt and they're starting to, you know, placate themselves that their view is right of the world. So therefore they're not going to do the hill. So what do? Do I say, oh, you'll be fine? No, I don't even focus on the hill. I get them talking about other stuff. Well, they're beginners, so I don't engage them in conversation. I maybe talk at them because they're a little bit out of breath at that point. But it's all about, God, just think about what that view is going to be like at the top of the hill. And what we do, we start to fall around with our thoughts and take our mind off that uncomfortable stuff. And suddenly we get to the top of the hill and they say, wow, I didn't realize it was that easy to run up hills. What's happened? All that we've done here is we've just modified the way they were thinking about that hill. We've taken their mind off it. But now immediately that's now started to build a tiny seed of a new habit that says, well, maybe I can run up hills. So this is the model that we're going to work with so hold this in the back of your mind as we go forward. So if new normality, if old normality was based around our previous thinking, our previous habits driving our previous actions, then new normal is going to mean different thinking and different habits. Otherwise, and we'll come back to this, we'll be sat here saying, well, I'm just going to wait for normality to return so that all my habits fit what they did before. Don't wait. Don't wait. Let's build a new habits, new normal. So that's the trajectory that we're on over this. I've got to show you this. I'm always on the lookout for this. This is in Berlin. About 18 months ago, we went on a family trip to Berlin and I had to take a snap of this. And this is on an apartment building. So these letters, each one of these letters is probably, you know, this high. Thoughts become things. What a very, very powerful set of 3 words. Thoughts become things. Thoughts become fears. Thoughts become reality. So it's really, really, really important that we understand what we think about. So thoughts become things. So we've been disrupted. COVID-19 is amongst us. and everything's changed. It's almost like, I was talking to a colleague a couple of weeks back, and he likened it to the grieving process. We've had a familiarity. Our old normal was that we could shake hands and we could hug people, and that we could get together in sports stadiums, and we could get around conference room tables at work. And that was familiar. That's how we did things. That was our normal, and it felt comfortable. And now we've got this massive disruptor. And this massive disruptor, when you look at this picture, 6 months ago, this may have conjured up all kinds of happy, warm, comfortable feelings. This was home. This was safe. This is where we socialized. This is where we relaxed. But for some people now who aren't able to go to work and are working from home, this now becomes the schoolroom. This is now the office. This is where problems get discussed. This is where we laugh. This is where we cry. This is where we live our life now, in that home unit. So suddenly we've got this. We've been ripped away from that previous normal, and what we're experiencing is not dissimilar to the grieving process here. We are either in denial, we'll just keep our heads down, and normality will return, or the other stages you go through. So what I really want to discuss now is, if that is you, so if your new normal is a new way of working at work, or you're having to find ways of fitting a very, very chaotic and unpredictable and uncertain life around what was familiar before, then this session is for you. That's really what we're going to talk about. Interesting comment come through here. All boundaries are blurred. Absolutely. Absolutely. So what we need to try and find a way of doing is establishing that safe haven. And I'll talk about how we can do that by creating habits. So not only has our habitat, our environment changed, but the other thing has changed is time. Time and our reliance on time. So human beings, as we are, we're very reliant on time. You know, our inner clocks, that all of those of us who have traveled long haul will know the impact of messing with that internal clock. It can make you feel physically ill, let alone tired and distracted. And now suddenly, if I'd shown you a clock with 7 o'clock on it, in the old normal, that would have been time to go get the train, go get the bus, get the kids their breakfast. It may be around 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. That will be the time to go and socialize with people over lunch, either in a street cafe or in a canteen at work. And then around 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, you know, we'd be on that journey home, back to that safe haven. It's all changed. Because even if you are working, you'll probably be working some staggered shifts to avoid social contact. And lunchtime, what's lunchtime? You know, and that time to start work. So what's happened is all our cues for starting and stopping activity has been blurred. I'll use the comment we had, and that in itself is a cause of a lot of disruption mentally. Our well-being is challenged here because we are habits. We love habit. We are creatures of habit, and normality and habits brings us security. So what we want to look at now is, how do we deal with that? How do we deal with all that stuff? So I guess I'd just like to take a moment right now just to offer any questions or comments here. So what we've taken us through here is kind of what's the mental model that we're working with, and why is it we feel the way that we're feeling. And I just wonder now what you're thinking. What are the areas which you find most challenging as you search for this new normal? So we'll just take a moment to see if we've got any questions on that point.
Well, while we're waiting for people to put in their comments or submit their questions, I'm curious to hear from Ting Wei, because I know that he's been working from home even pre-COVID times. I mean, what does circuit breaker or not, does that do any difference to you?
Well, thanks for the the reference. You're right. I think, to Ian's point, we are creatures of habit, and I think, the debate about whether work from home is good or bad, I kind of see it both ways, because I had the flexibility to choose where I'm most productive, and I had my habits catered around that before circuit breaker. But with circuit breaker, it's, I've got everyone else who's also working from home, and that's when you get virtual meetings that run up to 7, 8, 9 p.m. And then over a period of time, within 2-3 weeks, that becomes a habit, and that becomes a new norm, and you accept it. And back to what Ian mentioned, it does take a toll on your well-being, your health, your mental health as well, and your physical health. But that being said, there are positives, and I think maybe Ian may attest to it as well, where you can take mini breaks within your day to reset a bit of your mind, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And the good thing about, working from home is to control your mindset, your mental health. You can do some exercises, right?
Yeah.
Indoors or outdoors. And then that allows you to calibrate. So I think, to the point of this discussion is about finding that new balance, the new habits that help to balance your overall well-being and health.
So I think that's a really good point, and I see some of the comments here about upcoming recession and getting back into work. And it's interesting. I was being interviewed on the radio about a week ago, and one of the questions that was put to me was, in Europe, France is going back to work, Germany's going back to work, Spain's going back to work. The UK is still got a lot of people working from home. Why are we lagging behind? Well, I offered a different view. I actually think that we're leading, because I think going back to work, to those offices, and going back to old normal is going to be less productive. I would far rather we find a way of this new normal and working from home being a positive. So my personal experience, we've worked with many people during the period of lockdown or circuit breaker, as you mentioned, in Singapore, and lots of organizations that have done this really well have managed to ride this storm brilliantly. They've become more productive. And what I mean by doing it well, a lot of companies and organizations have been, they've put the infrastructure in place for people working from home. So, we've had the Wi-Fi and the laptops, but they haven't addressed the engagement and involvement and the well-being of those people. And I think companies that do that and are able to maintain that engagement with their people have actually stayed quite productive. And I think they will not go back to bringing people back into close contact in offices. And we may see a world where more home working is more acceptable, with still the social interaction which we all need. So I do think, and we're going to touch on things that we can do personally to move towards that. But I don't think that working from home, if we take one example of new normality, is necessarily a bad thing. It isn't a one size fits all. Some people will need and want that engagement, that social interaction. But I think we have an opportunity ahead of us here. So we're going to move in a little further here, because whatever the new normality is, it's down to us to do something about it, rather than waiting for it to be done to us. And part of that mental challenge which we all have, is feeling out of control. Lots of stuff going on out there that we have no control over, and that itself can be a challenge. So let's move from context into some things which we can do. The summary of where we're at. We know from the spider and from the fear of flying, and whether you are excited jumping out of an airplane or not, whether you like working from home or not, our thoughts, what we think about it, creates the habits, and our habits drive our actions. We also know that familiarity to us is security. And when it's unfamiliar and uncertain, it feels unsettling, and that is not good for us. So new normal, QED, means new habits, and new habits means new thinking. So what we're going to investigate over the next piece here is some simple steps which we can take, it's in our control, that we can take to start to normalize, to start to bring some safe haven in here. Because, I mean, as is coming through the comments here, you know, we've got lots of things out there that could happen. You know, rising unemployment, oversupply in the workforce, when is the airline industry going to recover? They're all uncertainties, and there's very little that any of us can do about that. And I would go back to a quote from a film. If anyone's seen the film Bridge of Spies, which is to do with Russia and America and double agents and spying. And there's a very, very interesting scene which I really drew my attention, where this guy is being arrested by the American authorities. And they're saying to him, "Why are you so relaxed? Aren't you worried?" And this guy looks at them with a strange look on his face and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I hadn't realized that worrying would help." And whilst that is easy to say, that's really what we need to do here, is how can we turn those thoughts which are causing anxiety and worry into something a little bit more robust for us, and move us from surviving this to thriving in this environment. So let's see where we can go with this next piece. I just noticed as we go as well, obviously one of the things from a lot of working from home, potential reduction in factory space needed, reduction in carbon emissions. Have you seen how much the world took a fresh breath of air whilst we weren't traveling as much? So as we go into this next piece, let me just talk about a process that I'd like to walk you through. It's what I call the what, the so what, the now what, and the what next. As you see, I like high-tech explanations. If you want the complicated course, you're in the wrong place. So the what do I mean by this? Well, with the what, I think the first thing that we need to do is to face what it is that is unsettling us. And that in itself is going to be unsettling. So what are you afraid of? What are you worried about? And I would strongly recommend that you write it down. You know, actually get out old-fashioned pencil and paper. There's something organic about doodling on a piece of paper. Yeah, great to see someone has a pen on the panel as well. So that's good. I have mine here too. There's something organic about when you write. There's something quite cathartic about emptying your thoughts onto a piece of paper. And a couple of things happen as you do that. When you write down the stuff that you're fearful of, or is worrying you or troubling you, when you write it down, you have to process it. You have to think about it as you're writing it. And often when we actually see it written on a piece of paper, sometimes it doesn't look that bad. The other thing we can do is to, if there's someone sort of close to that we can talk to, albeit by Zoom or phone call, but ideally, you know, socially distanced over a cup of coffee or something. When you describe to someone else the what you're worried about, sometimes when you say it out loud, you think, that's actually crazy. Why am I worried about that? It suddenly sounds a bit silly. And that's not that you should be ashamed of it, but what we're trying to do here is to get a degree of calibration. But the first thing is to actually face up, what is it that is driving our uncertainty? Because if we don't do that, then we kind of dance around the issue when we're trying to change our thoughts about it. So let me put a picture up. Okay, there's the bad boy. So we're looking here at a model of COVID-19. I wonder what that makes you think when you see that. I wonder whether it fascinates you, I wonder whether it drives fear and worry into you. I wonder when it bothers me greatly that when you see news programs, if you look at the backdrop behind the news presenter, it doesn't show you a good news message, does it? It doesn't say beating the virus or anything like that. What it shows you is a huge, enormous picture of a COVID-19. That's not helping us really, is it? So let's try and write down, try and face up to and realize what is it that's actually driving your level of uncertainty and concern. And it may not be the virus itself. It may be the knock-on of that. It might be having to homeschool. It might be having to change your working arrangements. It might be the fear of passing the virus on. It may be just related issues, but please try to write down and talk and share with others what is it that you're actually, what is bothering you. So that's the first thing. Okay, so what? Well, the so what, if you think back now to what we talked about at the start of this session, about our learned habits, our learned fears, our learned reactions to that either excite us or make us happy or make us sad. The so what here is we have to realize that that reaction is in our control. And I don't mean to be glib and blindly optimistic about this. There is nothing personally that we can do about finding a vaccine. There's nothing personally we can do about safety in public places. All we can do is control our own actions and our own thoughts. So what I would suggest is to recognize that we are in control of what we choose to do with what we think about. So let me put this picture up. So how many choices do we make on a daily basis that we don't even notice? So you see this as you're driving along. What do? We stop, right? We stop because that's what we are taught to do. Red light means stop. So that's a learned habit. And it says don't turn left. So guess what? We don't, because it feels wrong to do it. But ultimately, you're in control of that. The traffic light is not suddenly going to grab you and stop you moving if you drive past it. The thing that is stopping you driving past it is your choice of what to do with that thought you've just had. So just as that's learned, we can learn new habits as well. Now, we will try this. I can't see all of you. I can only see the two panelists here. So I'm just going to challenge you as to what it feels like to try and change the way we think about something. So let's do something that we're all familiar with. And I would like to challenge you all to try this, even if it may feel a bit daft, but I'd like you please to fold your arms nice and comfortably across your chest. Okay, so does that feel nice and comfortable? Right, so that's because that's the way we've always done it. So now what I'd like you to do, whilst you're still listening to me talking now, I'd like you to unfold your arms and fold them the other way. Try that. Yeah, right. How does that feel? That feels wrong, okay? That feels wrong.
Think about how to do it the other way.
Right. So the first thing here is, yes, we are in control of what we choose to do given an external stimulus, but it doesn't mean that it's going to feel right when you first do it. So let's just pause and take that with us into the next piece. So the what is what is concerning us. The so what is the recognition that we are in control of what we think and what we choose to do as a result of that. So the now what is now create some great new habits. And some of these can be really, really simple stuff. So if one of the things that is ailing you is the fact that you're worried about what's happening as this virus spreads globally, and that by watching the news and reading tweets about it, which you can do almost 24/7, if that's driving your level of anxiety, then don't do it. Challenge yourself to not check the news, maybe check it once a day, because it's not going to change your life. But what it will do, if you dare to try that, is it will, I guarantee you, start to not give you that stimulus to cause you to worry. It's a bit like if you don't like the picture of the spider, then don't look at the spider, is step one. Later we can work about making you like the spider, but for now, let's just get the spider the hell out of there. So one new habit might be limiting your exposure to stuff and news and information which you find anxious. Maybe one of the things that is bothering you is this, how do I use this space at home now? How do I deal with sharing the kitchen table with someone else who's working in the same place, or sharing it with children if you have children at home? How do I do all that? Because that in itself is stressful. Well, start messing around with your schedule and say, well, I tell you what, we'll have an hour in the middle of the day, which is the time when we socialize or we read a book, and start to compartmentalize. At the minute we're driven by our old habits. Well, it's 9 to 5, therefore I've got to fit my work into that time. Well, who said? Let's challenge ourselves and find some new habits. And there's new habits. There's lots of really, really simple stuff that we can do. So for example, mindfulness is popular at the minute. And let's just take some practical thoughts about mindfulness. Is sometimes a good habit can be just stopping and just being in the moment. And what I mean by that is taking some time to be alone. And you might be in your lounge or in your office or in your car, and just say, right now, I'm safe. At this moment, right now, in this second, I am safe. I'm okay. Right now, I'm okay. And you will immediately start to feel different. It's when you start winding your mind into the future that the anxiety happens as well. So some of these habits can be as simple as just compartmentalizing your day, taking what I like to call pit stops. We'll talk a bit more about those later on. But just doing stuff that you know makes you feel better. I'll give you some simple stuff here. This book, it's slightly sun-faded now, but this is one of these books. It's full of quotes. This is called Everyday Positive Thinking. And they don't all work for me, but sometimes if I've got a spare moment, I'll just, while I'm waiting for a Zoom call maybe, I'll just thumb through it. And I'll find, eliminate clutter in your home and work life. Oh, that rings a bell with me. And it suddenly makes me feel a bit better. It's lifted me a little bit. So that's a great habit. Have something nearby. Maybe it's something you like to eat or something you like to listen to. Something that is going to be a new habit that when you're starting to feel uncertain, that it just centers you, it focuses you on the now. Cue the next slide. Now, there's a word. That is a great word to form our habits around, is recognize that we are in control of what we can do now. We are not in control of what might happen tomorrow or next week or the next month or the month after that. And it's about now. In fact, there's a very, very wise quote from someone who described the now as the present. And it's called the present for a very good reason, in that it's a gift and it's ours to use. So being in the moment is a really, really good habit. I'm hoping some of this is making some sense with you, because it's understanding, recognizing you're in control and starting to take steps to do practical things that start to make a difference. Pit stops. Great habit is pit stops. This happens to be a photo of mine that I took a few days ago here. I personally find that when I am troubled or trying to deal with stuff in this heading for new normality, I find just being outdoors, outside, socially distanced of course, but just being outside is a great calibrator, a great way of just reminding us that we're actually very, very tiny. In fact, I often like to say to myself that all the trees and the hills here are kind of just watching this pandemic go past as a moment in history. It's only us who are getting wrapped up in it. So this thing about these new habits, I think, are really, really important. And, be creative about it. I'm just going to pause for a moment there and take a sip of water, because I could talk forever on this stuff, and just Chaylene, Timway, any questions that you've got at this point, or anything from the panelists, from the audience?
Yeah, we do have one in the context for project managers and business leaders.
Yes.
How would they go about creating new habits for the team beyond just themselves?
I think that's a great question. So there's two pieces to this, and we are going to touch specifically the thing about being a leader in here. If you are leading others, the first story I would say here is one that I remember from when I was in the police, and one that if you ever fly, you'll be familiar with. So when I was in the police and we were talking about self-defense and dealing with public disorder and difficult situations, we would always say, the habit was always, look after yourself first. Yeah, look after yourself first. Make sure you have your helmet on. Make sure you have your distance. Make sure you have your baton drawn. Make sure you have enough people with you to deal with whatever you're going to do. Don't just put yourself in danger first, because if you put yourself in danger and you get injured, you cease to be of any use. And every time you fly, what is the first thing that they say to you? In the case of cabin depressurization, what do they say? Put your mask on first before helping others. So I would say, as a leader of people and a leader of a project team, or even as the leader of a family or friends unit, where you are in a good place and you've developed good habits, what you've effectively done is you've put your mask on first. And that's what I would always say. Look after you first, and then rather than tell, but almost take people through this 4-step process that we're talking about here. Help understand what is worrying people. The project management world is a really interesting one, because this is a massive disruptor to any project. And when we go to what is the issue, what is the problem, it's a bit like the requirements capture phase of a project, very much so. And right now, you would be foolish to keep going after the same goals right now, because we don't know what's going to happen in 2, 3, 4, 6 months, 12 months. So even in that project space, is to get used to, well, let's set a near-term realistic objective that keeps moving us forward and that we can all buy into and feel we can do something about, but we can still move forward. Because to keep focusing on that long-term goal, at the minute, it feels like it's just moving away from us. So as a leader, and particularly in the project space, is use that, understand the issue almost as recasting a near-term, you might, in an agile world, you might call this a sprint. You know, what can we do? What can we achieve in a month's time? So that's what I would say in the project space, or as a leader. Put your own mask on first.
Thank you, Ian. I think that's a very good response to the question, and I think it's very relevant to everyone here. Whether you are part of a project team, whether you're leading a project team, you can only help others only if you can. Before helping others, you have to help yourself, and almost lead by example of how you created new habits for people to follow you as well as a leader.
I think the other thing which is really worthwhile doing here, and this applies as a leader, this applies in a project environment, but it also is very, very relevant in the wider world. We need to grab on and use positive measures and positive news to influence us. Now, it's a bit of a sad indictment of the media industry in general, that I guess it's fair to say that they seem to be more focused on our attention and excitement than stuff that's helpful. So, for example, every day they report the number of deaths and new cases in COVID. Wouldn't it be great if we were actually measuring something else, like, you know, recoveries, or, you know, something else about? I'd be quite interested to hear how we're doing about progressing towards a vaccine, but we don't hear that because it doesn't generate attention grabbing stuff. So if we now wind that back to ourselves, you know, what can we grab on and use? When I was a leader in the corporate world, something which I would get my team to do on a regular basis is we'd start every meeting with, okay, what great stuff has happened this week? Because you know what it's like, if you start on the bad stuff, you suddenly spend the whole meeting spiraling into stuff that you can have little influence over. So getting into this habit, and this is not, let's be careful here, this is not blind optimism. This is just using positive actions as your superpower, as your energy, because you know it's going to make you feel worse to focus on the negative stuff. And you know you're a better person if you don't feel that bad. So why would you fuel that side that drags you that way? So that's another thing, is to really focus on not blind optimism. Let's not just say, oh, it'll be fine, because we don't know that. But at least focus on what we can validate and use, and share positive news. And there's some great examples of that when you see some bits of social media and some local groups. I mean, I don't know what your experience is in different countries and areas, but you're seeing community action has been brilliant. People pulling together to make the best of situations. And I think that's a great habit. That's a great habit. Anyway, let's go on, because when we've done the what. So what is it? Write it down, face up to it, restrike those requirements. So what? Recognize, just with the spider and the fear of flying, we are in control of that thought, and therefore we can change it. The now what being, well, let's generate some new habits. Let's start with the simple stuff. Let's not try and, conquer mountains straight away, but just to get used to even writing down every day, what 3 things am I grateful for today? In this electronic world, my life is governed by Apple calendars, but I still have a book. And in my diary every day, I write, in the corner of every day, I write the 3 things that I'm grateful for today. And I'll tell you that one of mine today was pebbles. Yeah, I know, pebbles. In our house, we've got some pebbles which we've collected from beaches. And actually, I think they're brilliant. To hold a smooth pebble in your hand, brilliant. I'm glad we invented them. So you might be grateful for all sorts of tiny stuff, but when you start to express gratefulness for something without that just sounding sort of glib, again, what it's doing is it's getting your mind used to dealing with grounded stuff that is very near and dear to you. So the what next, people often say to me, what's the silver bullet? What's the magic potion? What's the one thing which you would say is the differentiator between being okay and not okay? The new normal and the new better normal? I think it's one word. It's this. Believe. Believe you can. Believe you can do something about it. It's very easy in this world of message alerts, news alerts, tweet alerts. It's kind of prodding at our primal instinct to react in a heightened way, rather than saying, let's just calm this. We've got this. Yeah, today I've got this. Today I'm okay. Today's good. And once you start to give a little bit of self-belief, I'll go back to a running example. If I was to say to a person who had joined me to run, and I said, okay, so what we're going to do, I know you've never run before, but in 3 months' time, you're going to run a 10-kilometer race. They'd never turn up again. I'll have scared them rigid. Why? Because they have no way they can believe they can do that. But if I said, tell you what, why don't we see if we can run for 5 minutes and walk for 2 minutes this week? And then next week, why don't we see if we can run for 7 minutes? Do you think they'll believe they can do that? Sure they will. And then when they've done that and it suddenly becomes 10 minutes and 15 minutes and 20 minutes, that inability is a distant memory. And the thing that's different there is we've generated that self-belief. So at the minute, when all around you seems uncertain and chaotic, focus on what you can do. So rather than letting all that news stories come towards you, switch it off and read a book. Switch it off and pick up the phone to someone that you enjoy time with, and you will be amazed at the effect it has on you. It starts to put you in a far better place. It makes you feel more in control. we've developed better habits, and you start to form that new normal. Write a list. On that list, have 3 columns. Write down stuff that you can start doing today. What is it that you could do today that would make a difference to you? And that's forming your new normal. Write on the list the things you're going to stop doing. If there's stuff you were doing that you know makes you feel bad, don't do it. You're in control. Stop doing it. Turn the news off if that's what ails you. So take some action. And if you're doing some great stuff, do more of it. You know, so Tingwei, you were talking about, you know, being outside and taking some exercise. Well, if you used to do 30 minutes of exercise and that made you feel good, well, then do 5 minutes more, or do it twice a day. So start getting into the habit of this stuff I'm going to do more of, this stuff I'm going to stop doing, this stuff I'm going to start doing, and start to keep going round this loop. Go around it once, then go back to the start. Okay, what else is bothering me? How do I change the way I think about it? What's the habit to defend against that? What can I start, stop, continue, and go back and just keep going around that cycle. And I guarantee that in a very, very short space of time, hours, days, certainly weeks, your head will be in a different place, and you will have started to create some new great habits. Everything is still happening in the world. It's still out there. You don't have any control over that, but this is about how you create your new normal. Okay, so there's that word believe. So let me just move this forward a little bit now, and just ask you now another point for questions. So we've gone through the context. We've spoken about how we form these habits, how that old normal worked, and what unsettles us. And we've talked about some ideas of things that you could do. I just wonder what thoughts you're having at the moment of, I've not thought of that, or actually this is a good idea and I'm already doing it. So I'd be interested in, you know, what this makes you think now. What might you be trying after the call today? What might you do tomorrow?
So while we're waiting for people to put in their comments, I'll probably just share personal experience. I've noticed that I am definitely very creative and capable of my mind of creating or telling myself these stories. And the next moment I know is what's wrong with my life, and thinking far ahead, like 5 years or 10 years down the road. And it sounds like, just a recap of what you shared earlier, it sounds like when we are overwhelmed with emotions, or it's our brain trying to make predictions and guesses to make meanings. And so if we change these ingredients, we can essentially design or architect this whole experience by just clearly articulating or labeling these emotions of how we're feeling and what we're experiencing. And I think it's important to first practice to have this awareness or this consciousness. I think it's easy when you fall into the trap of feeling overwhelmed. How do you snap out of it? I mean, some people will find that very difficult unless you have that, you know, consciousness or awareness to begin with, that you're aware, you know, this is what's happening to you.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Awareness is a large part of this. So even just being aware that you actually, it is within your power to change the story you're telling yourself. Even that itself is quite a significant thing to recognise. If you've heard of there's a guy called Darren Brown who he's based in the UK, and he does all sorts of mind control stuff. And I went to see him, my wife and I went to see him a couple of years ago, and it was really interesting because he spoke to exactly what we're talking to here now. And he said we all tell ourselves a story every day in our, you know, and it's happening in our head all the time. We've got this little voice inside us which is telling us our story. It's our narrative for the day. And the only two things that we control ever in our life is, one, the story we tell ourselves, and secondly, what we choose to do with those thoughts. Everything else is not yours to control. Now, that can be both a release and scary, because if we take that to its nth degree, what that means is, that means I can't control whether I get cancer or not. No, absolutely. I can't control whether I'm going to win the lottery tomorrow. No, absolutely not. Not in your control. But if that bothers you, well, we can do something about that, because what you think about it is in your gift. And I think when we stop trying to wrestle our lives into shape and try to, don't matter how many times you read the World Health Organization figures, it isn't going to change the shape of the curve in your country. The only thing that will change the shape of the curve in your country is by what you think about and the actions you choose to take in social distancing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So does that make sense? And part of that is, we don't all carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. And sometimes society makes us feel that. And so to kind of shed some of that burden means we're a better leader, we're a better friend, we're spending a bit more time, we're habitually feeling better about ourselves, we're believing a little bit more about what we can do, we're picking up books that make us feel good, we're watching things on streaming media services that make us feel good, we have a playlist that we know is going to put a smile on our face. I have a book. This book also sits on my desk. This is my eldest son's photography. That's another one which I occasionally flick through. Why? Well, I'm proud of him, but obviously it makes me feel good. Well, why wouldn't I do that? I know that if I feel good, then I am in the best place to help everyone else, because I put my mask on first. And this is the habits. This is the stuff. So shall we move on? Let's just go. So this is a couple of slides just to help you think specifically examples which might be in the work or family situation. So we might be in a position where we're thinking, this situation's awful. I don't think I can cope with working from home, or I don't think I can cope with these new shift patterns, or I don't think I can cope with this uncertainty. Okay, well, we can't change that, but what we can change is our thoughts. So why don't we try these instead? Hey, I've got more time to spend with my family. I've got time to organise my thinking. I've got some time to try this stuff that Ian's talking about. I've got the opportunity to help those around me, because I'm in a pretty good place. I've already put my mask on. I've got the opportunity to help others. Nothing's changed. The situation has not changed, but what we have done is to change the way we think about that situation. And if you are a leader in projects or business, maybe you've got this. I don't know what to tell my teams. This is new to me. I don't know how to engage with my teams who are now working from home. I don't know how to split myself across multiple shifts. I don't know how to do this. This is new. Well, okay, why don't we try this? Talk to your team. Engage with them. I dare you to actually ask them what they think. It isn't all about the leader having all the answers. Sometimes it's that degree of vulnerability in saying, folks, look, this is new to me too. How would you like me to keep you engaged with what's going on? So your team have ideas too. You can, by doing that, increase your sense of community. This is something which I personally think this is a big dividend of COVID-19, is I think it has driven the creation of community within businesses, within residential areas, all over the place. We're seeing this sense of community, small communities. It's something which large companies strive to do by team building and that kind of thing. Whereas what we've done here, by forcing people into a situation and a common shared experience, as long as they listen and talk to each other, you can get this new sense of community. And you can get to know your teams better. Again, I'll go back to those companies we've worked with who have done working from home and alternate shift pattern really well. They've engaged and really talked and listened to their employees and looked after their well-being, and have got to know their people better. Those who have not done so well, who have just put the infrastructure into place, they're not getting such a benefit from it. So in both of these examples, the situation hasn't changed. but I would just offer you a different way of thinking about it. You're in control of those thoughts. Give it a try. What do you have to lose? So let's wrap up. We're just on the hour here. So I think what I'm saying here is normality means habits. That's what our normality is. Old habits will not hack the new situation we find ourselves in. So we're going to need to create some new ones. If you don't, it will continue to feel uncertain. It will continue to feel worrisome and stressful. So create new habits. It's in your gift to do. Keep the stories you tell yourself on a daily basis 100% positive. Don't let a negative word pass your mouth. When someone wants to draw you into a conversation of how awful it is, change the conversation. Many years ago, I broke my arm. I was into triathlons at the time, very keen into triathlons, and I slipped one February after a very, very successful winter training. I slipped and I snapped my humerus straight through my arm there. And I was back at work after 3 weeks. My wife drove me to the office and they said, "What are you doing back? You could have had much longer off." Well, I just want to get here and get on with stuff. And what did they all want to talk about? I bet that really hurts. I didn't want to talk about that. I said, "Oh, it's fine. Anyway, what's been going on here?" Change the conversation. Keep that voice 100%. What can we do? Focus on what you can do. Oh, we can't go to school. We can't meet up in the park. We can't go for a beer. Yeah, okay, but you can read books. You can go for walks in the countryside. You can learn something. You can Zoom. There's so much more you can do than you can't do. And engage with your community. And when I say community here, I mean your professional, your friends, become part of a community if you're not already part of one, because we're all in this together. Genuinely, it's, it doesn't, the virus doesn't differentiate. We are in this together. And by sharing that experience and encouraging each other, put your mask on first yourself before you help others. New habits, keep it positive, focus on what you can do, engage with your community. Don't wait for normality to arrive. The number of people I hear, yeah, well, it'll be great when we're back to normal. No, don't settle for normal. Create your own better normal. Let's not go back to how it was. Let's do better. And I guess I would leave you my last slide. When you are leading others, when you're inspiring others, when you're trying to help others, my favorite lady who is Maya Angelou, and this lovely quote from Maya: "People will forget what you say and what you do, but they will never forget how you made them feel." This is about the new normality. The faster you create those new habits, the better. And that better normal, the amount of passion and emotional energy you put into creating those new habits and demanding yourself to change for the better, then the faster we find that new better normal. So I think self-awareness, you are in control. You've got this. You've got this. Just work out what it is you're going to start, stop and continue. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you so much. So we have about, say, 10, 15 minutes. So people, if you want to put your questions, your burning questions to Ian, here's your chance to do that. You can either type in the chat box or put it in the Q&A down below. So I'll just ask Ian this question. I mean, you've done your training and consulting to people all around the world. So just on these past few months, are you seeing any similar themes or patterns that's come up in terms of what people are thinking? What are their concerns?
Yeah, I think the I think there's two things I think come to the top, and I've mentioned one of them in passing earlier, but I'll just sort of restate it. Really, is where you are a company or a leader of people or an influencer, and you have people whose working environment is being turned upside down. you have a duty here. You have a moral duty to encourage them, listen to them, support their welfare. The biggest challenge that I've come across in the last 4 months is, I'd go as far as to say, it's not that people are worried about losing their job, and that's not to say that they are, but in terms of the size of the problems they're facing, the biggest one is that of mental well-being. So the themes are here. The companies with the most resilient teams, that the companies who are going to weather this storm really, really well, have really thought about maintaining the mental well-being of their teams. And that is as simple as keeping in touch, not sending an email, but getting them on Zoom, picking up the phone. Hey, how's it going? Anything I can do to help you today? That is a simple. So that I would say is theme number one. Theme number two is, with all this talk of new normality and, you know, vaccination proximity, how soon, it's almost driving some people to be tempted to wait. Well, we don't do anything different. We'll just wait because we want to go back to normal. We only get one life. It's short. I don't want to wait another 6 months to wait for a vaccine. I still want to be living my life today. So the second thing, I think, is to encourage people, and ourselves included. And I don't mean being blasé and ignoring all the guidance and rules and going and doing irresponsible stuff. I mean, do what you can. Do what you can do. Enjoy the fact that we are reshuffling the deck. And if you're working for someone and you think this is really not looking good, this is, I could lose my job here, then get on the front foot. During recession, if you statistically look, it's the time when most startups start. Is actually approaching or in recession. How crazy is that? That's because people suddenly decide, I don't want to be under the control of someone else and their decisions. I want to take my own decisions. And it's so I would really, look for those opportunities. If that's something which really concerns you and you think there's a high likelihood you might lose your job, don't wait. It's a bit like managing risk and uncertainty in projects. You know it's going to happen. Do something about it. Whilst you have time, whilst you're still being paid, whilst you're still on furlough or whatever, re-educate yourself, network, use your community. What can you do? Take some responsibility for your life. It's yours. So I think they would be the things. Don't wait for the normal to return, and make sure you look after well-being.
Great. Thank you, Ian. We do have one more question about any examples of leaders that you feel or you've seen that have successfully adapted to the new normal.
Mm-hmm. So I won't embarrass companies by their names, but I will mention. I'll try and spread them around a little bit. There's a company in America based in California. And I think, in fact, we've, without giving you the answer, we did a joint webinar with them which is available on our YouTube channel, and we were talking about companies that have looked after their teams well. So if you want to go search that out, I don't want to publicize it here, but they're a great example because all the stuff we've spoken about, that's what they've done. They've kept engaged with their team. So they're a good example. Small businesses in general, I think, have done a great job. If I look at our local community, I think our local small businesses have done a great job with their people. So yeah, I think it would be wrong for me to give you specific examples. I'd certainly be happy to give people that separately afterwards, but I don't think it would be right to broadcast publicly. But there are I have experienced over the last 4 months those who have made a very, very good job of it, and I can tell you that, you know, what I've talked about in terms of that engagement with their people, that's the differentiator. That is the bit. They've been resilient, they've been empowering, they've been humble, they've been engaging, and those are the features of the companies and individuals who have done well. I'll mention something about values actually on our way past. Many of you will work for employers or teams who will have declared what their values are. It's a, you know, we'll put them in a frame in our reception area. Look at your companies around you in the last 4 months. They will reveal their values when under pressure. So the companies that have done well have lived their values truly during the time of challenge, and that is another feature I would say.
Thank you, Ian. We've got one more question here from a Miss Evelyn. With many of us working from home and telecommuting with machines, mobiles, and that creates a different way of social engagement. How can we reach that level of engagement again? That, you know, with these small communities, new communities that are formed, that might be different from work.
So the question is, how can we, without being face to face, how can we? That's a good question. In fact, I was talking about that 2 weeks ago with a customer. So let me give you, I think, bad examples of use of technology. If you used to have a meeting that lasted half a day, where people would sit around a table and spend time playing on their phones until they suddenly had to wake up to contribute to the meeting, and you try and replicate that meeting in a Zoom world where you're going to get people sat in front of a screen for 4 hours and contributing for 20 minutes, you're using new technology and old habits equals inefficient. So I think the real way of doing it is to become creative. So some great examples of virtual community use is sometimes we don't need to all get together in the same place. So I will give an example because I think as a business, I think we've done pretty well at engaging our teams. We've got creative, and I was inspired by my son's local school in Derbyshire, where their head teacher every single day during lockdown recorded a 10-minute school assembly on YouTube on an unlisted channel and invited the entire school and teachers to it. So that's not bringing them all into one room at one time, or we've got to go to assembly at 6:30 or 7 o'clock in the morning, but he put it there for people to enjoy when they could. So what we do every week, we use WhatsApp heavily. There are, you know, other platforms out there as well. It's very, very easy to create dynamic interactive groups. So that's, I would definitely use that kind of thing. Where you want to convey a message, which is a sharing of information, get creative. Record yourself a YouTube video. You don't have to post it for all to see. Make it unlisted and just send it to your team, and maybe get different members of the team to record that message on a weekly basis, the team update. And for Zoom meetings or Teams or, you know, all the other different virtual platforms, try and use them where you come together for 10 minutes if it needs everyone together, and then either use breakout rooms or have people only meeting who need to meet, like breakouts. And then maybe 2 hours later, you might all come back together and have 10 minutes together again. But get creative with, you know, try not to be driven by our old habits of we all have to be present all the time in a meeting. I would far rather that people were truly present for a shorter amount of time. In other words, when they're in the meeting, I can see their eyes, they're engaged with me, and they're not twiddling on their phone because they might as well not be in the meeting. So I think the best examples I've seen is creative ways of, and challenging our norms of ways of using social media creatively. That's what I would say. And, you know, I'm in my 50s. So, you know, I've learned stuff on social media in the last year that I didn't even know it could do. So I've got my own consultant on social media. I've got 2 sons who are teenagers, and I've had great ideas from them. So, you know, just be creative. Let's not be stuck in that old normal. And that's, I think, a way of generating community really, really well.
Awesome, that's great. So there are people who shared that without the office environment, it's challenging to make these casual connections, like, you know, your pantry small talks. On that aspect, what do you say to people?
Okay, so again, I'm going to tell you our example, because we have a WhatsApp group, which is a full WhatsApp group. So it's got our entire global team in there. And the way we've set that up, this is not a place to talk about major business issues. Consider it as the board in the office where you would pin up a notice. It's the place where, if we were all in one office together, you might share some chit chat. And that's the way we do that. And we tend to run little themes, and I've seen other companies do this as well. So this month we're on Food Month. So people are just posting food that makes them smile and takes them back to their childhood. And that's casual. You don't all have to be sat there at the same time, and people in different time zones can drop their idea on, and then, you know, a few hours later someone reacts to it. So it's a conversation, but it's just more spread out and relaxed. But it does fill the space of the coffee machine conversation.
So just doing a time check. I wonder if any of our attendees have tips on this to share. If you do, post them in the chat box. Otherwise, Ting-Wei, I'm going to ask you, what's your biggest takeaway so far tonight?
I think my biggest takeaway is that reinforcing that positivity. You know, when I was in Rolls-Royce, and, you know, Ian, you were part of the high performance culture as well. It's very similar to your tree diagram. That, you know, your beliefs drives your attitude and thinking, that drives your actions. At the top of the results cone is outcomes. And when you have positive outcomes, it goes back down, and you reinforces that cycle of positivity. And, you know, everything still rings true. You know, it's my biggest takeaway from Rolls-Royce was going through the high performance culture training. And it's all still very relevant, more relevant now, and it's still, you know, very aligned to everything you said today. We are more in control than we think, but we just need to draw what the boundaries are of what we are actually in control, which is mostly around our thoughts. Less about, then we can think about the actions that arise from those thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's my takeaway. I'll shoot the question back to you.
Oh, well, for me, I think I'd say so important to be kind to ourselves. And what Ian shared, I mean, it's so obvious, being grateful, writing down or noting down your wins, no matter how small they are, because you are your greatest supporter. Pat yourself on the back, you know, for little progress that you made. Because, yeah, if you're not your greatest supporter, then who will be?
I must share with you. I must share one book. It's just, you've made me think about it there. This is quite an old book. It's written by a guy called Napoleon Hill. Success Through Positive Mental Attitude, written back a long while ago. But there's a lovely bit in that book where he describes the company owner has got his engineers coming to present to him, and they say, "Oh, Mr. Hill, I'm really sorry to tell you, but I'm afraid this design isn't going to work." And he'd say, "Brilliant, great." He says, "No, Mr. Hill, you haven't realized I've told you this isn't going to work." He said, "I know, that's great. That means we're a step closer finding the one that will." And that's not blind optimism. That's, you know, that goes back to the Bridge of Spies. Worrying help? Of course not. So yeah, whatever works for you, keep that voice positive. Why wouldn't you?
So any more last words or advice you want to wrap up for the night?
I don't like giving advice. Okay, I don't want to tell you to do it my way. All I would say is I continue to learn how powerful the mind is. I never cease to be fascinated how powerful what we think about is. And I'm no scientist, but what I do know is if you are kind to yourself, if you believe in yourself, if you are careful about the choice of what you spend your time on, and you keep enjoying every moment in the journey and don't keep trying to tick stuff off, and you keep enjoying that moment and keeping positive, then great things will happen to you. That is for sure, and you'll certainly enjoy the journey a lot more than if you don't. So that would be my, if that's advice, that would be my advice. That's what I would do, and it's worked for me, and it works for the people that I interact with. And we might all put slightly different slurs on it and techniques, but fundamentally it's the same psychology, it's the same neuron pathways in our heads, the same chemicals, and the way to influence them is by positive reinforcement and enjoying ourselves, which might sound daft amongst a global pandemic, you know, and it might be wrong to enjoy ourselves. Well, why, you know, and again, it's not meant to be glib. Be kind to ourselves, believe we can. We know the negative side works, so why don't we give the positive side a go?
Yeah, Evelyn just posted a comment in the chat. She said, keep looking at the half-filled glass and think what to fill in the empty half.
Perfect. Yeah. Believe you can. Believe you can. Someone once said to me, oh, and I kind of get this then. So if I keep thinking about winning the lottery, does that mean I'll win the lottery? I said, no, because that's not in your control, right? But if winning the lottery bothers you, we could do something about that, because that is in our control. Control what you can control.
Okay. Thanks, Ian. Thanks for joining us all the way from the UK. And thanks to our audience for being so engaging with us throughout this webinar. So we're going to close this session now.